Marcus Garvey emphatically told us that if you have no confidence in yourself, you are twice defeated in the race of life. Philosopher Aristotle defined confidence as a balanced virtue, courage, stemming from self-mastery and calculated action rather than mere audacity. Another great philosopher, Marcus Aurelius, taught that confidence comes from focusing on internal controls rather than external, uncontrollable events. As a developer and a trainer of leaders since 1999, it is my pleasure to share with you a presentation that hopefully will resonate with you. As I speak, you may identify some characteristics in those who lead you, whether in the workplace, in politics, in your community, or in your church. You may also identify some of the characteristics in yourself. As you identify these characteristics, I want you to pay keen attention to the recommendations that I will share with you to get over this issue of low self-esteem and lack of confidence. I'm speaking on the topic, the hidden crisis in leadership. Low self-esteem and lack of confidence do not always look like weakness. It is important to listen carefully so that you can understand and rebuild self-esteem, especially in leadership. Sometimes low self-esteem and lack of confidence looks like micromanagement. Do you know anyone who seeks to consistently micromanage those they lead? There is also passive aggression, and this is very subtle. Sometimes when they are speaking, it looks like they are smiling, but they are really passive aggressive because they are seething on the inside, but they are putting on a facade. There is also suspicion of the motives of others. Sometimes the suspicions are unfounded. Over control, refusal to delegate or share power, emotional volatility towards safe targets, so they will lash out at persons who they believe are unlikely to retaliate. There is avoidance of direct conflict, so instead of dealing with issues, these leaders seek to allow issues to run the course and hopefully dissipate without being handled. Psychologically, this is not strength, it is insecurity in armor, in battle fatigue. Leadership magnifies whatever is unresolved within us. When insecurity rises into authority, organizations suffer. All types of organizations. To understand the solution, we must understand the roots. So we're going to be looking at some contributing factors to low self-esteem and lack of confidence. These draw on developmental psychology, attachment theory, cognitive theory, socialization research, and philosophy of selfhood. Let's first look at insecure attachment in early childhood, because a lot of the issues relating to low self-esteem and lack of confidence can be traced back to the childhood of the person who is so affected. Children who experience inconsistent caregiving often develop anxious or avoidant attachment patterns. And this has an impact on their lives when they find themselves in leadership. So they have a difficulty trusting others. There is hypervigilance and a fear of betrayal. So they keep most of what they want to get done, or the things that are important, within a small group or clique, or those who are very, very close to them. And so they do not maximize on the resources, including the human resources they have available, because of this mistrust, this hypervigilance and fear. Then there is chronic criticism. During the formative years, they may have been criticized a lot when they were growing up. Repeated negative evaluation, which wires the brain towards self-doubt. Research shows internalized criticism becomes automatic negative self-talk, so they begin to tell themselves that they are not good enough, and they begin to imagine that people are also thinking that they are not good enough. On leadership, there is this impact of second-guessing decisions, assuming failure before even trying, and sometimes they do not realize their full potential because they overanalyze and they end up in analysis paralysis. There is also the issue of love, conditional love and performance-based worth. When love is tied to achievement, identity becomes very fragile. Overwork. This is how it shows up in leadership. Overwork, fear of mistakes, intolerance of others' imperfections. Then there is also the social comparison culture that leads to low self-esteem and lack of confidence. In terms of leadership, this can lead to jealousy, insecurity about competent subordinates. So you have persons who are working alongside you. They are very competent and capable, but because of your low self-esteem and lack of confidence, you do not give them the autonomy that they need in order to function at their optimum. Trauma and emotional neglect is another factor that shows up. Trauma affects the nervous system. It also affects your identity formation, who you are. In terms of leadership, you may overreact because of this trauma and tension. There is emotional flooding, there is defensiveness. Sometimes you feel defensive even before the person is through expressing their opinion. Bullying or public humiliation can also lead to low self-esteem and lack of confidence, especially during your adolescence. If you go back into your teenage years, you may have been bullied. You may have been publicly humiliated, maybe even by your parents or older family members or siblings. This is a key identity formation stage, according to Erickson. And so this can lead to a fear of public failure for a leader. It can lead to a sort of indirect communication style. Instead of communicating directly and confidently what you want to say, you tend to beat around the bush, and this leads to confusion and conflict. Then perfectionism is another factor that can influence your self-esteem and confidence. This is often rooted in a fear of rejection. Research links this to maladaptive perfectionism. It also links it to anxiety and burnout, so you have to be very, very careful with this particular trait. Research links this to micromanagement and difficulty in delegating. Cultural or societal marginalization also leads to low self-esteem and lack of confidence. You may have experienced prejudice or systemic exclusion. This can affect your internalized identity, your self or personhood. The impact on leadership is that you may be hypervigilant and you may experience imposter syndrome. I have a book that is available on overcoming imposter syndrome. It's available through Amazon or directly from me. Another factor that affects your self-esteem and your confidence is an authoritarian upbringing. Maybe your parents were very rigid. You had rigid authority models that suppressed independent decision making. They did not give you autonomy or latitude to make decisions, and so it would have affected your self-esteem and your confidence. When you find yourself in positions of leadership now, there is a fear of making bold decisions, and sometimes decisions languish for years, sometimes for decades. You don't make decisions and you are not firm in making decisions because of this factor. You rely on external validation and you depend on the person just above you within the chain of command to help you to make the decision, although you have the autonomy to do that. Then learned helplessness is another factor. This is a big one that affects your self-esteem and your self-confidence. Repeated failure without control. Seligman's research pointed this out, and in terms of leadership, there is this issue of avoidance of risk. You try to avoid risk and you try to shift blame, and without actually introspecting to see where you may have fallen short and accepting the responsibility for whatever occurred. Ultimately, as leaders, the buck stops with you, although you may delegate, but accountability comes back to you. So blame shifting is unacceptable. Lack of competence development can also lead to low self-esteem and lack of confidence. Confidence grows from mastery. Bandura's self-efficacy theory tells us that confidence grows from mastery. The more you practice to do something, the better you become at it, and the better you become at it, the greater your level of confidence is. In terms of leadership, if you have a problem with lack of competence development, then you may seem to overcompensate, or you may seek to avoid certain tasks or areas of responsibility. You may even delegate it away without having the competence to follow up and provide guidance or mentorship. Imposter syndrome is another big one that affects your self-esteem and your confidence. High achievers may attribute success to luck rather than ability. You feel like you don't belong. In terms of leadership, there is the fear of exposure, and you mistrust praise. You feel that people are not genuinely praising you because you feel as if you are inadequate. Cognitive distortions is the 13th factor that I'm highlighting, 13 out of 15. I'm just focusing on 15 today. Catastrophizing. You see everything as just major and it's going to blow out of proportion. Mind reading, personalization. Don't try to read people's minds. Most of the time you're going to be wrong. You have to communicate effectively. One-on-one communication. Listen carefully. Pay attention to body language. Pay attention to tone. Pay attention to message. Make notes if you have to make sure that you fully understand what is being communicated. Otherwise, you may assume negative motives from your team members or your peers. The 14th factor is unresolved shame. Shame is different from guilt. Guilt says, I did wrong. Shame says, I am wrong. Quite often, persons with low self-esteem or lack of confidence feel that they are wrong. In terms of leadership, how does this affect you as a leader? You'll tend to be passive-aggressive, or there may be displaced anger. So you throw the anger at the wrong area or thing rather than seeking to properly deal with conflict. The passive aggression is very subtle because the facial expression may be blank or may even appear to be pleasant because the teeth may be showing. But inside you may be seething, very angry on the inside, but you just try to keep that calm expression, knowing that the issue is not resolved, but you are trying to avoid dealing with it. That is how anger now becomes displaced, because the anger may be taken out on the person that is least likely to retaliate. And the 15th and last one that I'm going to be dealing with for today is lack of philosophical grounding of identity. It is important to know who you are. Without a stable concept of self, your virtue, your character, your purpose, then identity becomes reactive, and sometimes you may seek to link your identity to your title or your position rather than who you truly are virtuously in terms of your character and your purpose in life. Philosophers like Aristotle emphasized virtue-based identity over external validation. And when you get to this philosophical level where you can understand virtue, the importance of doing something good just because it's good and not for a reward, then you're going to have a challenge if you can't get to that point. So it's important to recognize that you treat others in such a way that you would want to be treated were you in their position. In terms of leadership, If you're affected by this, then your leadership style is going to be driven by ego preservation, image preservation, instead of the mission of the organization or the team. We're going to look at some behavioral patterns of insecure leadership. Low self-esteem in authority often manifests as withholding information, important information also, avoiding direct conversations, favoring or preferring safe individuals, and so you tend to form cliques, and you find that sometimes the clique is in the minority when you need a majority. You have emotional outbursts towards non-threatening targets, resisting collaboration or teamwork, interpreting help as a challenge to your authority or intellect. This is psychologically protective but organizationally destructive. Let me repeat that. This is psychologically protective but organizationally destructive, so it needs to be addressed. Having said that, let me share with you some steps to improve self-esteem and confidence. Evidence-based interventions from cognitive behavioral therapy, positive psychology, leadership research, and neuroscience will help you. Let me share some of them with you here, free of cost. 1. Develop self-awareness. Journaling helps. Write things down. Put your feelings on paper. Take the time to read it over. Ingest it, evaluate it objectively, and make the changes that you need to make. Assess feedback objectively. Get 360-degree reviews. Allow your peers to review you, you review them. Allow your subordinates or those persons you are leading to review you, and you review them. It has to be coming from all persons who interact with you, so that you can get a full picture, an objective picture of how you are perceived by others. And when you get the feedback, do not be angry. Use the feedback for improvement. Research shows self-awareness correlates with leadership effectiveness. A leader that is self-aware is going to be more effective than a leader that is not self-aware. Philosophical approaches to confidence differ from modern self-help, Ancient philosophers, particularly Stoics like Marcus Aurelius, Aristotle, and Plato, tended to equate true confidence with internal strength, self-knowledge, and moral virtue, rather than external validation from others or arrogant self-belief. So there is this maxim, know thyself, the Delphic maxim from Socrates. This ancient Greek proverb is the foundation of philosophical self-assurance. Know thyself. It's carved into stone at Delphi. This simple yet profound statement was the foundation of Greek philosophy. It wasn't just about self-reflection. It was about self-mastery. Know thyself. Introspection, self-evaluation. These are very, very important practices if you want to be effective in leadership. Fast forward 1,000 years and we still recognize that self-awareness is the foundation of all growth. The second recommendation I want to make to you is to challenge cognitive distortions. Be careful of your thoughts. Identify and replace negative automatic thoughts with positive thoughts. CBT research demonstrates strong effectiveness in improving self-esteem. And when I speak of CBT, I'm simply speaking of cognitive-based theory. The importance of understanding the mind and the thoughts and the self. So identify and replace negative automatic thoughts with positive thoughts. You have the power to do that. The mind is a powerful thing. My third recommendation is for you to build competence through mastery. Practice, practice, practice. Do not be ashamed to say, I do not know, please help me. Get help. Even if it means that you have to pay for the help, the coaching, the mentorship, get help. Work on building your skills and competencies in all areas of your life. And practice, practice, practice. Practice makes perfect. As you practice, ask for feedback. And this is where a good coach comes in handy, because a good coach can give you feedback on the competencies and the skills you are developing. especially your soft skills, your people skills, your technical skills as well, if the coach is competent in those areas. But practice makes perfect. So you have to practice. Read widely. Self-efficacy grows from successful experience. So every time you learn a new skill, you master a new area of competence. Give yourself a reward, even if that reward is rest, even if it is a small reward, and keep on improving. We need to become lifelong learners. Don't resist learning. Don't curse education. Be open to learn, because you can benefit and those around you, including your family members, will benefit as well. And hopefully the leaders that you will coach and mentor. Reframe failure. That's my fourth recommendation. Reframe failure. Adopt a growth mindset. Carol Dweck writes about this. Leaders with a growth mindset show higher resilience and innovation. They are also more open to feedback and constructive criticism. In fact, they will even request constructive criticism because they see this as an opportunity to grow. My fifth recommendation, seek secure attachments in adulthood. Be around persons who can help you to grow. Mentorship and coaching relationships can rewire attachment patterns. The brain is neuroplastic. It can improve. Neuroplasticity supports emotional development at any age. Even persons whose brains were affected by major traumatic events like accidents have discovered that through neuroplasticity, they can redevelop certain skills and competencies over time with practice and affirmation. My sixth recommendation is for you to practice direct communication. This is extremely important. Communication is central to every aspect of life, even to persons who are developmentally slow, deaf, or dumb. They have their own way and means of communication, and the body language accounts for a greater proportion of the message than the words that are spoken. So if you can become an effective communicator as a leader, you are well on your way to becoming an impactful leader. Replace passive aggression with assertiveness training. You need to be trained, and you have to see that you have the need and admit that you have the need before you will see any improvements through training. Research links assertiveness with improved workplace morale. And when I say workplace, it is not just in corporate, but all areas of work, all areas of life, including faith-based organizations, financial institutions, corporate institutions, NGOs, and others. My seventh recommendation, accept genuine help. Collaboration increases performance outcomes. High-performing teams demonstrate psychological safety. Amy Edmondson speaks about psychological safety. You can read up on her work. Very, very important. If you are a leader that creates psychologically safe environments, then you are going to have persons who you lead feeling comfortable and safe, not just to confide in you, but to also express any form of dissatisfaction, dismay, or disagreement they have with you in a respectful way. The eighth recommendation, separate your identity from performance. You are not your job. You are not your job title. Philosophically, anchor identity in your character, who you are as a person, your integrity, not outcomes, not your job title, not your position. Virtue ethics emphasizes becoming rather than performing. I'm doing quite a few live streams now because I'm about to get quite busy. So I'm going to invite you to do some research on your own around the topics that I'm sharing with you this morning. Separate your identity from performance. Number 9, develop emotional regulation skills. You must be emotionally intelligent. You must be able to control yourself. If you feel angry or anxious, breathe deeply. Breathing exercises and mindfulness. Be aware of your environment. Go out into nature, take a walk. Relax for a moment, count to 10 or 20, so that you can be more objective in receiving whatever information caused you to feel anxious and processing that information to make wise decisions. Neuroscience shows regulation reduces your amygdala reactivity. Some time ago, I did a presentation on the brain and emotional intelligence. I spoke about the amygdala hijack. This is really an intense, immediate emotion. You overreact to stress. It bypasses rational thought. This was coined by Daniel Goleman. He speaks a lot about emotional intelligence as well. It occurs when the amygdala, the brain's emotional center, triggers a fight or flight response, disabling the prefrontal cortex, that part that is responsible for logic and reasoning. It leads to reactive, impulsive, and often regretted behavior. Sometimes after you have responded impulsively as a leader, you end up feeling embarrassed because you did not think through your response. And as a result of that, your response came across as being more emotive than controlled. So be careful of the amygdala hijack. Let me look at some of the other recommendations I want to make to you. Address trauma professionally. We all experience trauma at some point in our lives, but you have to address your trauma in order to get rid of it, and so that it does not come back and affect your relationships. Therapy significantly improves self-concept and rational trust. Go to a counselor, a therapist, a psychologist. Talk it through. Work through the trauma so that you can put it behind you. Reduce social comparisons. Don't compare yourself to others. Even in this time of social media where you're seeing all the glossy pictures and videos and you have a tendency as a human being to compare, be careful. You have to limit digital comparison triggers. If you find this is affecting you, then limit your consumption. And I want to encourage gratitude practices. This will help to improve your subjective well-being. When you become more of a grateful person, you tend to see persons as helping you more so than someone that you should aspire to become. And there is nothing wrong with being aspirational, but in being aspirational, you have to make sure that you are not envious of the other person or resentful of the other person. The next recommendation is to replace shame with self-compassion. Be gentle with yourself. Kristin Neff's research shows self-comparison improves resilience and reduces anxiety. And clarify your purpose. Purpose-driven leadership reduces insecurity and increases stability. Stability in the self and within the organization and the team. And practice incremental risk-taking. Be a little more bold. Confidence grows through action. Avoidance reinforces fear. When you get to that point where you are not afraid of constructive criticism, you are more likely to take greater levels of risk, ask for feedback, and improve. If you're going to develop the competencies and the skills that you admire in others, you have to try to practice incremental risk-taking. And cultivate humanity instead of an ego defense. It is so easy to go into the ego. We talk about the id, the ego, and the super ego. Be careful of the ego. It will destroy your relationships. True humility is secure identity. Research shows that humble leaders increase team engagement and productivity. I can talk about this over and over ad infinitum. I've been training leaders, tutoring leaders from 1999 through the University of the West Indies, subsequently in financial organizations, in hospitality organizations, and now through my consultancy and the training practice. And I can tell you this as a fact. Humble leaders increase team engagement and productivity. And a humble leader is not necessarily a passive-aggressive or a quiet leader who smiles a lot. A humble leader is a leader who understands his or her position, but does not lord it over those persons he or she leads. We're going to talk about some research evidenced outcomes of improved self-esteem in leaders, because ultimately the objective of this is to help leaders to improve their self-confidence, and their self-esteem. Studies consistently show that healthy self-esteem in leadership leads to increased employee engagement, tick, proven. Lower staff turnover, proven. Higher innovation, proven. Greater trust within teams, proven. Reduced workplace conflict and environmental conflict, including other forms of organizations outside of the corporate entities that so often people reflect on. Better emotional climate in the organization, increased productivity within the organization. If you see a church that is growing rapidly, if you see a bank that is growing phenomenally, if you see a business that is thriving, there is a positive emotional climate. There is psychological safety. Increased productivity is inevitable. Higher psychological safety, stronger collaboration or teamwork, improved organizational stability and sustainability. Secure leaders create secure environments. Did you know that? Secure leaders create secure environments. And although this is based on psychology and sociology, I want to share a biblical perspective. Scripture offers a profound corrective to fragile identity or low self-esteem. First of all, your identity must be rooted in being created in the image of God. Genesis 1:27. Your worth is intrinsic. It is not earned. So you don't have to try to impress anybody. Be who God ordained you to be. Look at David's early insecurity. And look at David later on when he was grounded in his kingship. David was able to show growth in identity through his trust in God. Remember Moses, he was doubtful of his ability to speak. Who am I? He was met with divine reassurance from God. Identity is anchored in your calling, not in your charisma. So stop comparing yourself with the charismatic speaker or the charismatic leader. Be who God has ordained you to be. Look at Paul's transformation. This demonstrates strength through weakness. And he spoke about this in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. So biblically, confidence is not arrogance. It is security in God's design and assignment in your life. Remember that perfect love casts out all fear. Fear-driven leadership is healed by secure love, starting with the love of God. So in conclusion, we want to move from fragile to formed in God's image and likeness. Low self-esteem is not a character flaw. It is often a developmental wound. And you would have heard me mentioning Erikson and Freud and some noted psychologists speaking about what could have happened during your childhood or adolescence that could lead to low self-esteem and lack of confidence that you are experiencing now in your adulthood. But guess what? Wounds that are unaddressed, they become weapons in leadership. So that's why there is always that seething underlying conflict there between you and the people you lead. So the journey forward requires self-awareness, courageous reflection, skills development, relational healing, philosophical grounding, spiritual anchoring and therapy if necessary, mentorship, coaching, training. Healthy confidence is not loud. Healthy confidence is steady. It does not need to control. It does not fear capable people. It does not lash out. It does not compare itself with others. It leads from security. So let us end where transformation begins, with clarity. As I recap, self-esteem is the overall evaluation of your worth. It answers the question, do I believe I have value? Healthy self-esteem says, I am imperfect, yet I'm worthy. I make mistakes, yet I'm not a mistake. My value is intrinsic, not earned. It is not arrogance. It is not superiority. It is not self-obsession. It is not ego-driven. It is stable self-worth. We spoke of confidence. Confidence is trust in your ability to act, learn, adapt, and recover. It answers the question, can I handle what comes? Confidence is not the belief that you will never fail. It is the belief that failure will not define or destroy you. Self-esteem is about who you are. Confidence is about what you can do. When both self-esteem and confidence are healthy, then leadership becomes steady instead of reactive and conflicting. There is a mindset shift that is required. Transformation requires a profound internal shift from proving to improving, from defending to learning, from comparing to growing, from controlling to collaborating, from reacting to responding, from hiding weakness to developing strength. Insecure leadership asks, am I being exposed? Secure leadership asks, how can we build together? This is not a cosmetic change. It is habitual restraining of thought patterns. There's a habitual shift that is required. And you build habits through consistency and practice. Confidence is not built in one breakthrough moment. It is built in repeated small decisions. Choosing direct communication over passive aggression. Asking for help instead of resenting others silently. Pausing before reacting. Practicing gratitude regularly and consistently. Replacing negative self-talk intentionally. Taking manageable risks consistently. And accepting feedback without collapse. Neuroscience confirms that repeated behaviors rewire neural pathways. I spoke about neuroplasticity earlier on. Repeated behaviors rewire your brain, your neural pathways. The brain changes when habits change. You have control over that. And as you do the work that is required to make the changes, be gentle with yourself. This is where many leaders stumble. They try to fix themselves harshly and suddenly. But shame does not produce growth. Safety does. Self-esteem improves when you practice self-compassion. Speak to yourself as you would speak to a valued friend, someone you love. Begin to love the self. Allow yourself to be developing, not finished. I talked about lifelong learning earlier on. Be in consistent developmental mode. Recognize that growth is nonlinear. Psychological research shows self-compassion increases resilience. It increases motivation and emotional stability far more effectively than self-criticism, especially when you're criticizing yourself negatively. And remember that gentleness is not weakness, It is wisdom. There are phenomenal benefits of healthy self-esteem and confidence. When internal security increases, transformation spreads throughout every area of life and the organization, including within the family. There are social benefits. You have stronger friendships, long-lasting friendships, reduced jealousy, greater comfort in group settings, increased likability due to emotional steadiness. And as people are drawn to you, even if you're an introvert, you find that you feel more comfortable in spaces where other people are and in expressing yourself. You have an aura, and that aura pulls people to you. It makes you more confident and comfortable. Secure people are easier to trust. There are interpersonal benefits, healthier communication, reduce passive aggression, greater emotional safety in relationships, and the ability to resolve conflicts directly. Teams thrive under secure leadership, If you want to build a phenomenal team, set a secure leader over that team and watch them strive and grow. There are also significant spiritual benefits from a biblical perspective. When your identity is rooted in being created in the image of God, your worth is settled. It's a done deal. When confidence rests in divine calling rather than ego, when you understand your purpose, then fear diminishes. Even when you are attacked, you will continue to work for the Lord as He has called you because you know your purpose. When you know your purpose in God, attacks, oppression will not affect you. Remember Joseph? Remember what he said to his brothers who had left him for dead and then sold him? In Genesis 50 verse 20. He said, "But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive." Joseph understood his purpose. If you are going to be self-assured and confident, you have to know your purpose so that even when oppression and attacks come, you can remain resolute and stay focused. Spiritual confidence produces peace instead of striving. He did not strive with them, he was at peace. It produces faith instead of fear. It produces humility instead of defensiveness, and service to others instead of self-protection. Perfect love casts out all fear, and fear is the root of much insecurity. Let me repeat that for emphasis. Fear, F-E-A-R, is the root of much insecurity. And I like to use this acronym for fear. F-E-A-R, false evidence appearing real. You think things about people and assume things about people that are totally incorrect because of low self-esteem and a lack of confidence. So you have to fix that. Perfect love casts out all fear. Then there are the professional benefits. Research consistently shows that leaders with healthy self-esteem delegate effectively, inspire innovation, retain talent, make clearer decisions, build high trust cultures. So trust becomes part of the organizational culture, and they experience lower levels of burnout, if any burnout at all. They also become role models for those persons they lead, coach, and mentor. Secure leaders elevate performance, not suppress it. There are also psychological and emotional benefits, Lower levels of anxiety, reduced rumination. You're not going over the thing over and over and over and over and over in your head until you become angry or anxious. There is greater emotional regulation. You're more emotionally intelligent. There is increased resilience. There is improved mental well-being. So the internal noise in your head quiets and often goes silent. There are also financial benefits. Confidence affects economic outcomes and decisions more than many people realize. There's a greater willingness in the confident person to negotiate and get a better deal. There is a higher likelihood of pursuing promotions, increased entrepreneurial initiatives, improved financial decision making, reduced fear-based spending. And even in a faith-based organization, you will have greater inflows because people see that you are someone of integrity and someone who is confident enough to lead the thrust forward to success. Studies show that self-efficacy correlates strongly with income growth and career advancement. When you believe you can act, you act. The story is told about the little train. I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. It kept going over the hill consistently. When it reached the top of the hill, it says, I knew I could. When you believe you can act, you act. Then there is a big picture. Low self-esteem shrinks your vision. Healthy self-esteem expands your capacity. Insecurity consumes energy. Confidence frees up energy. So you have the energy to push, to thrive, to grow, and to help your people to become the best that they can be. Insecurity protects your ego. Confidence builds a legacy, and not just for those who are close to you, but a legacy within the organization, the community, the nation, the world. This journey is not about becoming louder. It is about becoming steadier. It's not about domination, but about direction. It's not about pretending that you have no weaknesses. We all have weaknesses, but it is about knowing your worth is not threatened by your weaknesses. Remember, I told you how to fix those weaknesses. Earlier in the presentation, I presented some strategies to address that. My final encouragement to you is that you are not broken beyond repair. You're not permanently defined by early experiences. Neuroplasticity is real, and I explained what that was earlier on in the presentation. Growth is possible. Identity can be rebuilt. You can rebuild your identity. It doesn't matter what age you are. The leader you are becoming is stronger than the insecurity you inherited if you pay keen attention to everything that I have shared with you in this presentation. And when you lead from a secure identity, your relationships flourish. Your teams thrive. Your spirit rests. Your mind steadies. Your career expands. Your influence multiplies. Because secure leaders do not shrink others to survive. They build others because they are not afraid of being diminished. And that is not merely confidence. That is transformation. Thank you for listening. This is a personal development session. Have a beautiful day. Let us pray as I close. Most righteous and eternal God and Father, I thank you for the moments I've spent sharing with your people. I pray that every listener will be edified. I pray that what has been presented will transform lives, not just the lives of the listeners, not just the leaders that will hear, but those they lead, those with whom they work, those in their families, in their communities, organizations, including churches, corporate, government-based, and other organizations. May your perfect will and purpose be fulfilled in our lives as we give you thanks and praise and glory and honor in Jesus' name. Amen. Have a beautiful day.